Flying Monkeys Wargaming Podcast, where if Wargaming was easy, it would be your mom. Special guest today, pleasure to have him on. You guys know him from 40K Stats Center, one of the king math nerds of Warhammer 40K, Peter the Falcon. What's happening, man?
Hey, man, caca, all that stuff that people want to hear. How you doing?
Good. So you're surviving, you're making it, you're still out there, and you're still alive.
Still alive, still barreling through, trying to make life work, right? So
reports of your death have been greatly exaggerated. So.
You got it.
So for those that don't know who the Falcon is, basically, I'm going to paraphrase, but pretty much got famous by being Warhammer famous by being a big math guy and making spreadsheets. So you want to give a little bit of background about yourself for someone who might not have heard about you or known you before this?
Yeah, sure. At least in terms of like Warhammer quote unquote fame, I hate that, but that's I guess what it is now.
Hey, I'm a B-level Warhammer celebrity.
It's true.
I'll take that.
It's true. You really are. Like this is a big deal for me to be on your podcast. Usually I don't make B-level. Usually I'm stuck in like the D tier, the Kathy Griffith of 40K. But yeah, about 3 years ago, I want to say, I started doing this stuff. I was listening to a bunch of different podcasts. I just moved to the middle of nowhere, northern Canada. Super into 40K. I had been for years, but not really the ultra competitive side. But I had a lot of spare time on my hands where I was living in my new job. And so I kind of started to dive in. I was listening to podcasts. 8th edition was about to launch at the time, so I was really intrigued as to what was going on. Sometime around January of, 2019, 2018, I don't remember anymore, 2018, I listened to an episode of Chapter Tactics where Val Heffelfinger was talking stats. And it blew my mind because the way they were talking about them, they're like, no one's ever done this stuff before, but Best Coast Pairings has sent me this spreadsheet, and it's real messy, but I think we can get some data out of it. And as someone that's like been really into other competitive scenes like Magic the Gathering and all these other things, I just didn't understand how a community that was all based around probability and numbers and all this other stuff wouldn't have that. So I messaged Pablo and I was like, hey, do you want somebody to do this kind of stuff? Because I definitely can. I've got the spare time, and I used to be a data analyst for a large company, so like it's not out of my wheelhouse. And he said, sure, whatever. I don't know who you are. I don't care. If you want to do it, go ahead. You're a big liar, basically. No, I'm just joking. He was really polite, but he had other people say they would do it before. And then I just did. I think the first tournament I ran data on was the Bay Area Open that year. I sent it his way. He got me in contact with Reese, and I was like shocked at how excited people were that this stuff was being collected all of a sudden. So I just kept doing it. And I slowly kind of grew the process. I built a website, 40kstats.com, and I just started tracking everything. And anytime people would be like, hey, it would be really cool if you could show us X thing, I would just add it to the repertoire until we had this like burgeoning set of data that people could look at.
Well, I dig it.
Because before that, it was really hard to know what was happening.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm just, I think a lot of people are just, they're not numbers oriented by nature while we play a probability game, which is kind of funny. A lot of us just want to go push models around the table, have a drink, bullshit with our friends, and me doing numbers and math sounds like work. But, it sounds like something you have a love of, so it's easier for you to do something whenever, if you love that kind of stuff and you can find a way to implement it into your hobby, it sounds like some magic happened there.
Yeah. No, it was a big deal. It isn't so much even that I loved the stats so much as I just loved the game and the people that play it. And people are so passionate about what's good and what's bad. And right, like everybody wants to internet jockey about it. But no one ever wanted to, back up their numbers. It was always like, well, I played at X store and Buddy with Sisters of Battle wrecked my day, so they're the best.
So you're kind of like the Wikipedia of competitive 40K now, huh?
That's kind of what I try to be. Like, I just want people to have the data to back up their stuff. And if it doesn't back it up, I want them to be able to say, like, okay, well, this isn't how the rest of the world's feeling about it. Why? Right? Start asking yourself the questions, and I love that.
So how do you go about compiling your data? What's your process? What's your approach? I know you talked about collecting some stuff from BCP.
Yeah,
it seems like it's just a lot. I mean, because you're pretty much tracking around the world. How do you come by it?
It's gotten a lot easier over the last few years. The first little bit, when not everybody was really using Best Coast pairings or Down Under pairings in Australia, I'd have to go to like 7 or 8 different websites. I'd be like trawling Facebook for results, and basically I would take them all down by hand. I would pull up all the lists as long as the lists were available. I'd make sure that there was no shenanigans, and I would manually go in, see what everybody was playing, put it all into a spreadsheet.
So the shenanigans side,
and then kind of spit out the results from there, and
I think we got a little lag. Sorry about that. I was saying on the shenanigans side, are you just making sure that it's clean data when you run across something like that? Do you toss it out if it's it's skewed or obscure?
Yeah, like I have like set paradigms or whatever as to like how, or parameters I should say, as to like how an event should look. If you don't have at least 10% of your lists uploaded, for example, I just won't track the event, because a lot of people don't put down what they actually played, right? It's a weird thing that happens. If you say you had 28 people, but I notice a bunch of people dropped out after round 1, like I'm not going to run that data either. Like I have little things that I check for. So
yeah, well, that's good. So I guess a lot of the reason I wanted to have you come on was, one, I saw someone trolling you on a Facebook group about when you're bringing back Stats Center. and I thought, man, I'm gonna ask Peter if I can have him come on, because I'm definitely not a numbers guy, man. I play this game because I do like the bullshit. I like to talk. I like to spend a couple hours with a buddy and just do the thing. And I think I have like this inherent sense of like, okay, this works on the tabletop, this doesn't work on the tabletop, and it's every now and then I'll hit up a buddy that does do math stuff, or I'll look at your stuff and see things, just kind of see if the trends in my mind are inherently matching the data or the numbers, and it's great to have you out there as a resource, and it's appreciated. Do you see yourself ever like just being like, I'm not going to do this anymore, or I'm walking away from this, or I mean, is it something you think you're going to have a passion for years to come?
I think I'll have a passion for it until someone starts doing it better. That's always kind of been my shtick since I got started. Like, I don't do it for money. I don't do it to be on podcasts or anything like that. I do it because people want it, right?
Right.
But if some guy comes out and he's like, hey, look, I found this way to do it way easier and the data's more accurate or whatever, then I will like 100% be like, here you go. You take the reins, because like that, like I just want it to be there. I want the data to be there. I don't care who's doing it. So yeah, I do believe at some point, I don't know how, I thought it when I first started, it would be like in 6 months or something. But I do expect some point, like we'll be at a point where I'm not needed any longer. And I'm cool with that.
Well,
super cool with it getting automated, and then I can just kind of relax and enjoy looking at the data rather than also trying to put it all together.
Yeah, so you like the dude on the Matrix who's looking at the zeros and ones and sees the hot redhead and
and then I'm like, man, I wish I was over there right now.
Well, so with someone asked, this is one of the questions that we had, and I'm paraphrasing this question. Someone asked what you've seen as far as the number of GTs this past weekend, being kind of coming out of COVID into the immunized world versus pre-COVID. How far off do you think we are from what we were at its peak as far as people getting in GTs on a weekend?
I think we're actually pretty close. Like pre-COVID, say not last summer, but the summer before, we were seeing like every week, probably like 3 majors and 6 or 7 or more GTs. And that was like week after week after week. And the last month or so, we've started to see it kind of bi-weekly. We'll have a week where we'll have 4 or 5 events. This last week we had almost 10, really. We had a couple that were just kind of shy of those numbers. And so I really think in the next month or two, people are like just clamoring to be able to go to events. And now that the US in particular is mostly vaccinated, the UK plans on kind of coming out of everything in June. I fully expect we're going to be like even crazier than we were back then. Like I'm going to have a hard time keeping up because like people want to have these events and now everybody's opening up to allow it. So
yeah, man, I gotta put my old man glasses on to see these. The other question that we had there's a few others that were on there. As a stats and numbers guy, how do you feel about not allowing codexes at GTs and above until they have an FAQ? That's a pretty good question.
It's a good question. I get asked it a lot. I think that like at a major level, you really should consider not having, not bringing in a codex without an FAQ. At a GT level, I do
Dark Eldar. Dark Eldar.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But like we also need the results. Like the funny thing is when you get something like Dark Eldar, even when we have all the data, people are still like, it's not enough, right? Like you just don't know what you're talking about. And if we didn't have the GTs that came out, say in the last weekend where they just, absolutely stuffed everybody, like we would have even less of a foot to stand on. So we do need people to take the risk. I just think like if you're a TO and you're trying to keep everybody happy, like once you reach a certain level, say major, I don't know, like what person point you want to call it, that you might want to say, okay, like we're not going to be the testing ground for this bullshit. Yeah. We'll let somebody else play it out, right? Or the other thing you can do is, stand up and just say, I don't think this is right, and make your own FAQ. But I know a lot of TOs don't want to do that because there's a whole lot of shit involved in that too, right?
I did notice this weekend a high number of them did the 20-point Reaver jet bikes, which I think was a solid move.
For sure. And I'd love to see more of that. Like, I'd love to see people be like, hey, this razor flail shenanigan isn't good, so you just can't do it, right? Like, I love that. Just call it out, guys. It's okay.
Yeah, even our local Drukhari guys are like, yeah, that shit's broken. I'm like, it absolutely is. So,
like, guys, most of your codex is broken, but yes, those two things in particular are also really strong.
Well, this is a good segue into the what becomes Drukhari questions. The next one is, are Drukhari, I swear I can talk English, are Drukhari truly as good as people say? Or are we just looking at it from at another meta wave?
I think both of those things are true. I think this is another meta wave. I just think that, like, because of the slowdown in releases, we're not getting hit with everything at once. And so we are very aware of how broken Drukhari are compared to what came before. And that's not really good. That's not good at all, right? Like, Drukhari coming out with a 70 to 75% win rate over... at this point, I've got thousands of games recorded that like are at below a GT level, and then 150 or so at or above. Like that's not something they come down from. Yeah. You can see them drop. Like whenever a codex comes out, sometimes they'll spike a little bit, and then they'll drop like 2 or 3 percentage points.
And whenever like, okay, this is where they're actually supposed to be. Play against it.
Yeah, but at a 75, like if it drops 3%, that's still busted, right?
What was do you recall what the peak of Iron Hands was?
The peak of Iron Hands, that first like 3 weeks or month, I guess, before they got their FAQ, they sat at a 74, so like 1% higher. A 78 when you didn't count for the mirror, so they were a little bit worse.
Okay.
A little bit worse. The thing about Iron Hands, though, was like they had like 5 builds immediately that were grossly strong. Dark Eldar, what I'm seeing is it's like 2 with some slight variations that are doing really well. So it's an easier fix, I think, if anybody actually wants to fix it.
Okay. Well, this question I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to make a guess at what the answer is, and then you can confirm if you've done the math. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, I didn't know if I lost you there. So what, if anything, do Drukhari struggle against I'm going to go out on the limb and say Drukhari struggle against other Drukhari.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I looked at the data from ITC Battles app, which is an app you can track your games on, whether they're in your garage or whatever. And there's about 1,000 Drukhari games since their codex came out, and I pulled like how they're doing against every faction. There's not a single faction that they don't have like a 70% win rate against. The best is like Imperial Knights, and they haven't played them a lot, so I can't tell if it's just because there's not enough data there with them yet or not. So maybe a bunch of 24 wound toughness 8 bodies are the way to go. But then how do you beat other armies, right? So it's an interesting thing. But Drukhari, like their worst matchup is themselves right now.
Okay. This one is, now that you're Captain America, does that make you Captain America or America's ass?
I see what you did there, Falcon. Ha ha.
That was pretty good. I actually
like
chuckled at that one. So, what is the percentage of Tau being played now compared to? I don't know what it'd be compared to.
Like when Tau were at their peak, like when people thought they were really good, Brian Pullen winning SoCal Open, Siegler doing all his things at like Nova, etc. They were at about a 7% of the meta, I believe is where they kind of peaked. So right around where Drukhari are right now. They're down to like 2 and 3%. So most people have dropped them because they just don't do well in 9th edition right now.
Yeah, I think that's a book that like they should get the Death Guard treatment, like where it's a complete rework of how it plays, how it functions, how it synergizes, and because it's a cool range. I would like to see it. I just I think at its heyday it was an unfun book to play against, and a lot of players caught a lot of grief because of that. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it wasn't fun to play against. For a lot of people, it wasn't even fun to play as. Yeah. So. There is a build right now that's doing okay, but like it's not carrying the army or anything. So
what's that build?
It's like Richard Siegler did a game with an on Art of War. Ben Neal, who's a guy out in I want to say that like was it Wisconsin area? No. Anyway, he came in second at a GT this last weekend. It's like Farside enclaves with a little bit of Viorla, so you have a bunch of breachers that are like pistol 3 when they're within like 12 inches, so they get a bunch of plasma shots out, and then you can fall back and shoot twice per game, which is pretty decent on a strong Riptide. So you put a bunch of these little things together, and they've got play into a few armies. So if you get the right matchups, you're cool. But if you play into like Sisters or Drukhari or anything that's actually good, you just crumble.
Yeah. All right. Have you found being a bird challenging in an enclosed wargaming environment?
Yeah. I want to spread my wings. It's difficult.
You want to spread your wings. Oh, man. All right. For the few leaks we have on AdMech, how are they looking to be set up to counter the current Drukhari meta? And if you believe, he says I'm paraphrasing, talking to you, believes it will make a new shift, that will Drukhari have to do to adjust? What will Drukhari have to do to adjust?
It's an interesting topic. I've been talking to a few people about this. AdMech have this really gross like 5 and 6 flyer build that was doing really well in TT. Yes, and people have finally started running it in GTs. I think that has like really good play into Drukhari right now. We'll have to see if that still works when the AdMech Codex comes out. If it does, this may be like a rock paper scissors situation where Drukhari and AdMech are just way better than everybody else, and it's like how much terrain do you have as to who's on top. The less terrain you have, the better it is for AdMech type thing. So we'll have to wait and see what their Codex brings.
The thing about AdMech is like I'm looking at AdMech, like I don't think AdMech sits bad at all right now in the meta, and. No, and they the from the previews and the things we've seen so far about their upcoming book, it's like they stand to only get better, which is
yep. Like their win rate has always been good. In 9th, AdMech was like the codex that I think a lot of pundits, even myself coming into it, were like they're just gonna destroy everybody. But because of terrain rules and hobby lag, they really never hit their stride. And then in like the last month, we're seeing them more and more at top tables, and they're really performing. And like you said, like they can only get better given what we've seen.
Yeah, I look. I don't know. It's there's. I feel like there's a definite power creep in the books. Do you ever do any data on that, or you ever have you considered looking at a way that you could chart that and represent that, or is that even a thing you think you could empirically show?
Oh yeah, you definitely can, and there's usually outliers. We saw it in eighth, like there were like definitive points where a new codex would come out and like say the next like four were kind of on a different level than the previous four. It seems like they're done in waves, and somebody comes up with a cool idea and it works, and they're like, okay, well, the next bunch of codexes we're going to do like that, and then we see another, and it just kind of slowly upgrades. And then intermix, there's always like that one book that somehow always stands the test of time. We saw it in eighth with Guard for the longest time. Like, even though they were one of the first books, we're just always competitive because they had a few broken strats that you could play around, and like just a deep codex. But then it was like, Eldar came out, and then there was like Eldar Tyranids and Dark Eldar that were very strong. But then we had the Imperial Knights release, and all of a sudden, like all the books after that were great. And then we had Space Marine 2.0 was just like head and shoulders above the rest, right? So like it comes in these waves where there is definite power creep, but it's hard to say if it's intentional or not, right? So.
Yeah, and that's my thing too. Is I think sometimes design teams probably are unintentionally doing it, and if this design team worked on one book, this other design team worked on the other book, they might not even really be, considering where some of those things currently set. They're just trying to make a good functioning codex, and
yeah, they want to make it fun and narrative, right? They're like, this is how it is in the books, and they come up with a cool new idea, and then everyone's like, we need to keep doing that, and so the next book gets it, but then they add something else, and you see this kind of like role where a few at least of the early codexes end up getting left in the lurch.
Yeah, I wish I could have about 5 minutes alone in the room with the person that wrote the Space Wolves supplement, but that's neither here nor there now. So.
I don't know how. Like the joke I've had, and I said it in eighth as well, was like in eighth edition, Space Wolves were the only army that got worse when they got a codex. And it seems to hold true in ninth as well.
It happened again. Dude, I was talking to somebody the other day, and my exact words were, I would rather have the index that I got for like a month and a half than this codex that I have now.
Yeah,
and I would have been better off. But it's I guess I will wait and see what happens in 10th edition or whenever they make supplements to catch up to the power creep with the books that are happening right now. So... well, Peter, I really appreciate you coming on today, and we did answer all the questions. I know you run a website that you keep a lot of these things on. Where can people go to see your work and see what you're up to?
Yeah, you can check out 40kstats.com. It's where I kind of put all the stats up. Sometimes I write little articles on there, very rarely, because I hate writing. I'm also on a show every week, the 40K adjacent show on the Honest Wargamer, and it's my favorite thing to do. We've done it every week since COVID started. We just like shoot the shit. We sometimes talk about 40K for 15 minutes, but most of the time it's just talking nonsense and making like shitty jokes. And yeah, I love it. So if you want to listen to something that's actually fun, that's where I would recommend you go.
That's good. I'll have to check it out. I have not been listening. I didn't even know it was a thing, so I guess I'll be on it now. That's more my style.
I wake up every morning at 4 a.m. on Tuesdays to do this show, so and it's because I love it so much. So
yeah. Well, and you've heard this show. We're not the classiest act on the planet, so that sounds appealing to me.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, good. Well, hopefully Val gets off his duff, and you guys get some stats going someday on Stat Center again. And I'll go check out the other podcast. But Falcon, I really appreciate you coming on today and answering questions for everybody, and I hope you'll do it again someday.
Hey, man, whenever you want, send me a message. I'll be there.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming on.
Bye.